Okay, it looks like the meeting has begun recording. So I wanted to welcome all of you to this evening's town hall meeting on the Placer County Rezone Program. My name's Chris Pahuli. I'm the Planning Director for Placer County. We have a number of staff here today that you're going to hear from. We have Jennifer Baez, who is a Principal Planner with the Planning Department. We also have Callie Kettinger-Cecil, who is a senior planner and is also the project lead for this rezone effort. And then lastly, we have Judy Tichy here. She's our admin support and will be assisting with the meeting this evening. The format for the town hall meeting this evening, we're going to have a presentation that Callie will be providing to all of you, walking you through the need for the rezone program, properties that have been identified for the rezone program, and provide you with information about that process and what it means for the county and what it means going forward from here. That will be followed by a question and answer period. And so if you're interested in providing testimony about this or in asking questions, I would encourage you to fill out a speaker card and provide it to Judy Tichy. We will hear from all of you that have filled out speaker cards. You will each have 3 minutes to provide testimony or to ask questions. We will go through all of those comments, and then we will provide a staff response. We will also move from the folks that have filled out speaker cards to the folks on the Zoom call. We have a number of people. At last count, there was about close to 30 people on the Zoom call. And then we'll follow up with asking if there are any additional people that want to provide a comment if you haven't already provided a comment this evening. So with that, I'm going to introduce Callie, and she's going to walk through a presentation for you all this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for participating and attending. I know there's a lot of different things you could be doing on a Wednesday evening when the weather is not scorching, and so I appreciate your presence and your time being here. My name is Callie Kettinger-Cecil. I'm a senior planner with the Planning Services Division, and tonight I will be providing an overview on the Placer County Housing Needs Rezone Program. So tonight I'm going to be providing information on the program. We will be receiving feedback from you all, and we'll be answering questions to the best of our ability. I will note that we are pretty early on in the process, so to the extent that we're not able to answer your questions, we will jot them down and be sure to follow up with you. So tonight, as I said, we are providing an overview of the program. We will be talking about what it means for the county, what the potential consequences are if we are not successful in our rezone program, and then also explaining a little bit about where we're at in the process and what the next steps are. So Chris Pahuli is the planning director. He provided the introduction. He is another staff member who is involved with this, and then Jennifer Baez is also here this evening to take notes for us, and then as Mr. Pahuli mentioned, Judy is also here as our administrative staff. So the rezone program has a couple elements to it. The first element involves the housing element and the regional housing needs allocation, which I'll explain in just a moment. It also includes a programmatic EIR, as well as a new zone district and a sites inventory and unit target. So those are the various components of this program, and I'll provide a little bit of history and information. So what is a regional housing needs allocation? A regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, is a number that is set forth from the state. The State Department of Housing and Community Development analyzes every jurisdiction's demographics in terms of population and income levels during every housing element cycle, which is an 8-year cycle. And the state takes a look at that, and they look at all of the various residential uses that are existing, and they determine whether there is more residential sites that need to be allocated, or if there is sufficient sites. When the housing element was being reviewed by the state in early 2021, they determined that the county does not have enough multifamily residential, nor does it have land suitable for residential development for low income and very low income residents. So what happens when we're assigned this RENA number is the state, through the HCD, gives that number to the Council of Governments. In this area, it's the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, or SACOG. SACOG adopts that RENA methodology, and then they provide it to the local governments. So I think it's important to note that every jurisdiction in the state is required to go through this process. This is not unique to Placer County, nor is it unique to jurisdictions within the county. So in addition to the unincorporated areas, all of the incorporated cities are also going through a very similar process. So the housing element, RENA, was adopted when the Board of Supervisors adopted the housing element in May. The state determined that Placer County was a metropolitan district, that our population had grown such in the preceding census cycle that we are now metropolitan, and therefore we need to have residential densities to support a minimum density of 20 dwelling units per acre and a maximum of 30 dwelling units per acre. And we are required to accomplish this by May of next year. So Housing Element Program 1 is the program that we are implementing through this program. The entire program in it, the language is up here. I'm not going to read it in its entirety, but essentially what this is saying is that the county shall rezone properties to satisfy our RENA. Initially, that RENA number was 1,107. After the housing element was adopted, there was a refinement of the list as some of the sites that were identified in the housing element had development proposals either in the pipeline or were actively being developed. So we had to refine our list, and as a result of that, our list had to get a little longer. So right now, there are a number of income categories that the state looks at. They look at very low income, moderate, and above moderate. And we were good for our moderate and above moderate, but it's the low income and the very low income that we are lacking in. So we have a unit target, and we are also targeting a buffer over that, and I'll discuss the buffer in a little bit. So the rezone candidate list that we're looking at, the sites that we're looking at rezoning, it's based on those sites in the housing element that have carried forward. It's also based on the refinement that I discussed, that after the housing element was adopted, we had to add some sites. That list now has 69 sites on it. The original list had 42. So it's been expanded quite a bit. In addition to the housing element list, staff has also identified sites, and property owners have also come to us and approached us about being willing participants in the program. So countywide, what we're currently targeting, as I mentioned, we have 69 sites on our existing list. That accounts for 218 acres. And it's important to note that that's almost double what our goal is in terms of acreage. And the reason why we are doubling that is because this is we're casting a wide net. And we're doing that so that we can get as many willing participants in the program as possible. What we're trying to avoid, and what we're cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to achieve, is that we will have enough willing participants that we're able to meet our unit target, and we won't need to force anyone into the rezone program. So that's why we have cast such a wide net and why we are approaching so many different property owners. So the site that was expanded after, the list that was expanded after the housing element was adopted was based on several factors, and these factors are discussed in the housing element and are the sorts of parameters that the state is looking for when we are identifying sites. So that includes sites that are between 1/2 acre and 10 acres, sites that have either a vacant or an underutilized condition, sites that have zoning that already allow residential uses, as well as location to services. And I think it's important to note that when we're talking about location to services, we're talking about things like jobs, infrastructure like sewer and water and roadway, as well as transit services. So those are the kinds of things we were looking at when we were looking at these parcels. So by district, it's broken up with District 5 having the most, and that's primarily a function of the sheer size of District 5. You'll note that Districts 1 and 2 have a relatively lower acreage than the others, and that is because of these specific plans, which I will get to in a moment. But it's important to note that this is a county-wide effort, that every single jurisdiction has sites identified within it. So in Districts 1 and 2, which is primarily West Placer, there are a number of specific plans for large residential developments, and there are allocations already through that. So that's the reason why those districts have lower requirements, is because those sites are being accommodated through the specific plans. So in District 1, we have Regional University and Placer Vineyards, and then in District 2, we have the Placer Vineyards, Placer 1 project in District 2. So that's why those districts have slightly different numbers than the remaining districts. So I'll go through a brief overview of the sites. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the individual sites. I've kind of tried to group these geographically just to give you an idea of where these sites are located at. So in District 1, as I mentioned, there are a number of sites that are within the specific plans. This is the Placer Vineyard specific plan. And there's sites already identified within there. But outside of the specific plans, we've identified 2 sites at the corner of PFE and Antelope, as well as sites between Baseline and Vineyard Road. This is Brady Lane here to the east. And then 2 parcels here that are across from this school here. This property owner has approached us and has discussed that he would like to be a willing participant. In District 2, there are 2 sites identified in Sheridan. And again, that is because that district does have sites already in the specific plan areas. But those 2 sites in Sheridan are in downtown Sheridan, between Riosa Road, H Street, and F Street. So they're 1.9 acres total, not much in Sheridan, but those are the sites that we've selected for District 2. In District 3, many of the sites are primarily within the Penryn Parkway. The District 4 boundary is actually right here, but I wanted to include these parcels here just to give you a picture of what is being proposed. So these sites here are being proposed. This site actually has an active development on it, so it would ultimately be coming off. And then these 2 sites here, the property owner approached us and is seeking to be a willing participant in the program. There's also 4 sites near English Colony Way. And there's a transit site right here, and that was one of the reasons why these sites were selected. And then there's also 1 site in District 3 in Newcastle at 420 Buena Vista Lane. It's 1.8 acres. There's a structure here. The church right here currently uses this for overflow parking. Have not been able to get in touch with this particular property owner, but this is one of the single site in Newcastle that we are looking at. So in District 4, we have a number of sites as well. There are some sites at the corner of Eureka and Auburn Folsom, as well as north on Douglas, and then east of that on Granite Lake Drive, there are 2 sites. There are some additional sites in District 4 down near Old Auburn and Sierra College. This is the island area of Granite Bay, in that it's surrounded by the city, but this is all unincorporated. Right here is the Placer Retirement Residence Project. If you're familiar with that, it's currently under construction. But this is a 4.8 acre parcel immediately adjacent to the east. Up here on Cavett Stallman and Sierra College is the Bayside Field site. And the property owner has said that they would be willing to dedicate a 3.2 acre area to the rezone program. So I mentioned District 5 has the most sites, and most of those sites are right here in Auburn, primarily along the Highway 49 corridor, as well as along Bowman near Rayleigh's, as well as the bowling alley and the hotel, and then 2 sites down on Lincoln Way. There are also 3 sites identified in Newcastle. There's sewer and water in Newcastle, and it's also pretty close to some good transit services. So we're looking at these 3 parcels here. And then we're also looking at a couple sites up on the eastern portion of the county, outside of the basin, but this is right at the line between Nevada County and Placer County in unincorporated Truckee. And then there's also one site that is on the list that is in Alpine Meadows. And that's this site right here. It has some existing workforce housing, and the property owner is looking to develop additional workforce housing. So those are the various sites that we're proposing. I mentioned earlier that we are looking to build in a buffer to our unit target. And the reason for that is because we are required to comply with what's called a no net loss provision of government code. So if a project comes forward on a site, we are required to keep track of that. And when I say on a site, I mean one of the sites that's identified on our list here. So we have to keep track of that, and we have to make sure that we have enough land suitable for residential development for the duration of our 8-year housing element cycle. So the purpose for the buffer is to ensure that we have some room and flexibility, so if a project comes forward and it's not a residential project, we still have some land available for high-density residential. So we are targeting a buffer. The state recommends a buffer between 15 and 30%. We would like to recommend to the board that we go for a 30% buffer so that we can be as conservative as possible, and also to avoid situations where we have to rezone more sites down the road. So these sites that have been identified would be rezoned to a new zone district. This new zone district would be called Residential Multifamily 30, and it would establish a minimum density of 20 dwelling units per acre and a maximum density of 30 dwelling units per acre. The intent of this zone district would be to enable various types of residential development, including duplexes, townhomes, apartments, etc. There would be other uses that are permissible there. They would be subject to review of a use permit, but the primary uses in that zone district would be residential. So there would be some commercial uses, but they would be limited, and in the event that a mixed-use project would come forward, the residential component would be required to comply with the minimum density of the zone district. I'd also like to note that initially we were going to propose an overlay zone district. And an overlay zone district in planning parlance means that it's kind of an add-on to your existing zoning. So we were going to have a combining zone district called, what was it? It was high density residential. And we were going to add that to the existing zoning so folks could have the flexibility of either building to their base zoning and doing what's already permissible, or the high density residential. Unfortunately, in April of this year, there was a lawsuit, and the state has determined that jurisdictions cannot use an overlay to meet their regional housing needs allocations, and we actually are required to rezone to the minimum densities that have been identified. So we've adapted, we've switched strategies a bit, and that is what we are now going forward with. So I mentioned we have 69 sites identified. We've been engaging in a lot of public outreach. We have sent letters out to all of the property owners. We have been meeting with them. As of this afternoon, we've met with, I think we're up to 22 now. We do have a number of willing property owners. We are going to be engaging in round 2 of outreach and sending a second letter out to those folks that we haven't heard from yet. And finally, we've also set up a web page that has notifications and places for folks to sign up. So we've been doing a lot of public outreach. We've also been going to all of the MACs. Between June and last week, we've hit most of the MACs, at least all of the MACs that are being affected by this program. So we've sent letters to everybody. We've been meeting with people. We do have a very small handful, I think it's 5 property owners who have come forward with properties that are not included in that initial 69 sites list. And right now, we're doing pretty well. Just based off the willing participants, we're at about 2,000 units. So, sorry, that's incorrect. 2,169 at the lower density, which again is the 20 units per acre, and then at the higher density, just based off the willing participants, we're at 3,253. So we're cautiously optimistic that we can meet our target as well as the buffer without having to force anyone into rezones. But again, we haven't met with everybody, and so we're still going through the process and doing this information gathering that's very important to the program. We are preparing a programmatic environmental impact report for this process. A programmatic environmental impact report is a analysis that's at a very high level. That would be looking at all of the properties that we're proposing to rezone. And we anticipate that the impacts that are likely to be associated with this are probably air quality, transportation, biological resources, as well as greenhouse gas emissions. So those are kind of the areas that we think there's likely to be some impacts, but again, the analysis will bear that out. So we do have a number of upcoming meetings. I mentioned that we've been going to all of the MACs. We have done that, and the next meeting is on August 15th. We will be going to the Board of Supervisors for the EIR contract. That is a very boring item, but you're certainly welcome to attend that. But we will also be engaging in the environmental impact report kickoff meetings. Those will begin later in the fall, likely September. And then we will also be going to the board for a sites refinement. So we will be going to the board, presenting the sites and making recommendations on them. So there have been, for example, we've gotten feedback from people that they don't want to see their particular parcel rezoned for various reasons, and we would present that information to the board, and the board would be providing us with direction based on the recommendation. We will also be going to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors next year for final adoption of the program as well as the EIR. And we are, again, required to complete this by May 15th of next year. So we have a very relatively short time frame in terms of the planning world. Things happen pretty quickly, and May is really just around the corner. So we've got a lot of work cut out, but we will have a lot of opportunities for public input, which brings me to my last item, which is questions, comments, and feedback. So at this point, we're going to turn it over to you all. And a couple things that I want to note before I do that, though, is I mentioned at the top of my presentation that in the event we're not able to answer a question, because we are quite early in the process, we will jot that down and get back to you with the information we are able to find. But really, the purpose of tonight is we want to hear what you have to say. We will be providing this feedback to the board when we go to them for the sites refinement. I'm also keeping track of written comments, so if anyone would like to provide a written comment instead of talking in person, because I know public speaking can be daunting, happy to do that as well. We have a sign-in sheet up here. You don't have to sign in right now, but before you leave tonight, if you could just jot down your name and email, that would be great. And then I also have my business card with my email address and phone number, so if you'd like to call me and have a conversation, I'm happy to talk with you. So with that, I think it's probably a good time to go ahead and open it up to public comment. I'll be sitting over here just because I feel like it's going to be a little awkward for me to be right here while we're all asking questions. I believe Judy has the speaker cards, so Judy will be calling you up. I'm going to switch the microphone over so that we can all hear you, and we will be taking your questions. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your time, and we're going to go ahead and open this up to public comment. Thank you.
The first speaker I have is Kathleen Byers. Kathleen, you've got 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening and thank you. So many questions I have. I could wait till you're done. Okay. Um, I was wondering what the RH30 standards were as far as size and height. I see that most everything is in District 5. I think North Auburn has been a dumping site of enough. It seems to be that there's a lot of other areas. There's area in District 3 that could be go to. Sunset, Baseline and Sunset is having huge buildings coming up. I don't understand why this can't be incorporated into their thousands of homes that they are building instead of piling more into Auburn. And yes, it's just I'm anxious to hear more information, and I kind of want to know if you are telling us or asking. When we don't want this here, what could we do? Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that question. I just wanted to interject here for just a moment and let those folks know who are on Zoom. When we switch over to the Zoom comments, please use the raise hand function so that our admin clerk is aware that you'd like to make a comment. Thank you.
Next speaker I have is Alan Lashbrook. You've got 3 minutes to speak.
Hi there. Before I say much more, the first question could we answer right now? What do you define as very low income people?
So very low income is a percentage of the median income. The median income for a low income household for 4 persons is $69,050 annually. That's a household of 4. But that's the median.
Would that include the homeless?
That is a household of 4 people, so no, it would not include the homeless.
Would that include all the homeless?
So a very low income would include up to 69,000. So anything below that would be able to be counted as very low income, correct?
The lady before me brought up a very good point. I just recently heard that California has 12% of the homeless, 12% of the population, and 25% of the homeless in America. You are creating more homeless sites here with nobody to be able to live there where you're locating these people. How can you do this? What about the homeless? What about these people? There's no public transportation. When I look along Luther Road on I-80, we're going to be dumping people out there and they're going to have no place to go. You're going to create more crime and everything because it's inevitable. How can District 5 have over half of all your allocations is in District 5? A very good point. What about the rest of Placer County? And I think, finally, the other thing is that there will be no jobs. The areas you're pointing out along I-80 and stuff, where would they get jobs there? Where would they be working there? Where would they have public transportation? I'll take my answer, not right now, but I really think it's very important. It really looks like they're dumping people out there, and we're going to have more of a problem than we already have up along 49. Thank you.
The next speaker is Arlene Keeley. Arlene, you've got 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening. So my first question is, when you're working with the when you're working with the owners, you talked about that you're working with the property owner. How does the community get involved for the people that live within the community and for the people that live within 1,000 feet of the actual development? when do they get to put their input? Because perhaps for the size of the parcel that you're going to, how many units they could get would have a significant impact on that particular area. So at what point would the community get to say, this is not a good site to have that many units? Is that going to be, no, I'm asking.
I think as we mentioned earlier, with the exception of the question about just very low income, I think we want to get through all of the comments and questions. We're keeping a track of all of the questions that are coming up, and then we'll respond to them comprehensively at the end.
I'm sorry, all righty.
No worries.
Okay, so my comment would be that the community should be included before you identify the parcels, and and then that's that comment, that they should be involved in it. It's not just up to the owner of the property. If they decide, if they want to participate, I think the community needs to also participate. The other thing that I would like to ask is, what happens, because it was brought up that the majority, not majority, all of the unit that need to be satisfied for Placer County is for low or moderate income. So there were a number of acreage that was identified, that property owners are very interested in participating, that was located in Granite Bay. So I was kind of wondering how that would suffice the type of housing that you need to, it doesn't match, because what are they going to be building on those sites that would fit that criteria? Like, it's not solving the problem, so I don't understand why I'm not trying to say that we don't belong, but I don't understand identifying those properties in Granite Bay is going to solve the issue that you have before you. So if you could, wouldn't that have to be a criteria? Because our concern in Granite Bay is the people that own this property is probably Capital Pacific, because they own a lot, and they've only put in high density in Granite Bay. And of course they want to participate, and then my question is, what happens if they aren't going to be used to suffice this? Could I just go on just a little bit longer, because it's really important?
We want to make sure that we get through everyone, so if you want to just wrap up with the closing comment.
Okay, the very important one is, what happens if they get their designation of 20 units per acre or 30, and they are not going to be, they're not being used for this to provide housing for low-income housing? So that, do they get to revert back to what they had before to protect the community from them just increasing density? That's really important.
I think we got that comment. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Stephen Dirk.
All right, thank you for having us. Nice to see you again. We saw at the MAC in Loomis. Just a couple things that I think are really important for all of us to know and for all of us to pay attention to. There's some very dangerous language in forced rezoning. The idea that the government, of any government, can tell anybody what they're going to do with their legally owned property is very dangerous language. So we need to stop with that terminology right away, because that's a very threatening term. You cannot tell someone what they can do or cannot do unless you are an oppressive government. That's number one. Number two, I am a proud resident of Penryn. We moved to Penryn out of areas that had a lot of high density because we wanted to experience rural residential, and we finally got there. And what's gone on in Penryn in the last number of years since we finally made it back is we've put in a huge Costco, We've put in a huge winery. And now you're looking at 2.5 miles apart, you want to put 585 units. One of which happens to be behind a dive bar, across from a convenience store, at one of the busiest intersections of a one-lane road. What are we thinking? There's 190 units that you guys want to put right behind a dive bar. There is no hospital, there is no infrastructure, there are no jobs, but there is a dive bar, and the only satisfaction that the state is going to get out of it is making sure that we hit our number that satisfies specifically very low and low-income housing. We're talking about being cornered in the community of Penryn and some of the Loomis Basin area by putting all of this infrastructure or all of these projects around us and blocking us out of access to our own neighborhoods. The impact to the roads, the impact to the police and fire services, the impact alone to the pressure on the ditch water systems and the irrigation canals and so on and so forth is massive. Find somewhere else. Thank you.
Next speaker is Jeffrey Moss.
Good evening. Callie, thank you. I know you've been through this so many times that you probably think about it in your sleep, and you shouldn't. But I have a couple of questions that can be addressed at a later time, but would like to raise them now. We talked about what qualifies very low income. I was wondering if the county had put together any cost per unit estimates for very low income, moderate income, and what have you, as far as construction costs go. And also, what these people would qualify to pay in rent for those units. I know all new subdivisions that go in have to have a certain percentage of affordable housing included within them. Are those affordable units included in your calculations to meet state requirements? And that being said, then, is multifamily required to satisfy the state requirements, or just affordable housing? Could some of this be met with deed-restricted ADUs or something like that? And like I say, I don't expect you to have this right off the top of your head, but if that's something that maybe at the next presentation could be addressed, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Next speaker is Ken Yeo.
The only thing I'm worried about really is the Edgewood Road rezoning, and specifically where it impacts Blitz Lane. The rezone area, cuts Blitz Lane off from Edgewood Road, although I think we have an easement, so they probably are going to have to honor that. But high density housing there would cause a tremendous amount of traffic on a road that's obviously not designed for it. Edgewood Road in general would not be able to take the traffic from all the parcels that you've shown. And I believe every homeowner, but maybe not every, but most of the homeowners on Blitz Lane would be against the parcel that's on the west side of the canal, which is on the Blitz Lane side. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Next speaker is Bob Grigas.
make 3 minutes. Basically, slide 36 is what I'm going to be addressing this evening. You've talked about different issues. You haven't addressed ag. You haven't addressed open space. You haven't addressed water quality and water quantity. We happen to be in a good year this year. Other years it can be problems. Do we have sufficient law enforcement for these additional units that you're adding? It's additional county services for these units that you're adding. Highway 49, wonderful highway to drive in rush hour. You're adding to that problem when I don't see a solution in sight. We're looking at Sheridan. My perception when I drive by that, that's a lower income community. I could be wrong. And you're going to add more to that community. Is that a good idea? My opinion, I don't think so. We're looking at law, the gentleman mentioned earlier, in terms of requiring people to do that. I know that's a state law, and the state of California has wonderful ideas, and I think we should follow all of it. No, I don't. I think we should push back. Push back hard. We're not Sacramento. We're not the other big communities. Must rezone is definitely a problem on the law side of it. Option for others. How about additional solutions as opposed to high density? How about give some of these smaller landowners the ability to rezone to a smaller parcel? So you have a 20-acre parcel. Allow them to rezone that down to maybe 5 acres, with the idea being they don't have to spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for roads and a whole bunch of other infrastructure. Make it more affordable. You add low income, you add high density, and what do you get? El Paso Heights, Oak Park. I've been there, I work there, it's a problem. Bottom line, I think we all came to Placer County for a good quality of life, and we want to maintain that. We don't see this particular solution as a way to maintain our good quality of life and the county culture, because Placer County has one of the highest horse populations in the state. Are you going to help with that? Probably not. Not to end on horses, by the way. Thank you.
Just a reminder that when you get your first beep, the yellow, you still have another minute, okay?
Oh, well, in that case.
Next speaker is Dale Kehoe.
For my minute, I forgot to add water, sewer, and trash as part of your item 36.
There's been so much talk about willing participants. There must be unwilling participants. I'd like to know what happens there. You answer me now, or you want me to wait? Wait.
Next we have Janice Petit.
Hi, I'm Janice Pettit, and I have a few questions. One is, you said that, I don't remember exactly which body adopted this, voted to adopt it. Does that mean that you had a choice in this matter, or is this a forced thing for the county from the state, and adopting is just a formality? Curious to know how this plan is different than before this was laid on the county by the state. What was your plan before this? Just clarifying that completing by next year, does that just mean adopting the sites by next year? And after that date, then what kind of dates are forthcoming? When does this building have to happen if it's adopted? The traffic question is clearly being addressed. Highway 49 highly impacted already. At Edgewood Road, it takes me 2 minutes to get out, whereas I used to be able to just zip out, and if we add all these units, just don't know how it's going to work. Curious how long this state cycle has existed, this 8-year revision, and has this thing where it tells the counties how many they have to have? Has this existed a long time, or is this a new thing that's happening? And you also talked about attending the MAC meetings, and where can we find out when those happen, where those happen for our local. And I'm sure I'll have more questions later. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jeff.
Hello, thank you. Jeff Pettit, Janice's husband, also a happy resident of Blitz Lane with Ken and Patty O there. Of course, mostly concerned about the possible rezoning right there at the head of Blitz Lane. A couple, maybe a half a block down, Edgewood. There's a nice big square spot that looks like it would be a rezoning spot, and then a spot right on the other side of the PG&E canal. So I'm imagining that PG&E probably has something to say about that, but I'd be interested to know that. It sounds like, at least at this point, we're just trying to make a number. We've been required by the state to come up with a plan and put a number out there. So, and I didn't really hear anything about what happens if you don't make the number. Not that that means much to me, but I'm sure it's in the mix of what's going on here. And is more housing necessary because people are like knocking on the door to get into North Auburn? Are there more people coming into California? Do people want to live here? I'm not quite sure what's the reason for the need for multi-unit housing in what I would consider to be a semi-rural area. And finally, somebody else brought this up, and I'll be done. Some residents, of course, might not think that this is a great idea. So what can we do? Is there anything to be done? And if there isn't anything to be done, I would appreciate, a straight answer, because people don't want to keep coming to meetings thinking they have some say, and there ultimately will not be. Anyway, thank you.
The next speaker is Michael Garabedian.
Seems to be facing the wrong way. Mike Garabedian, Placer County tomorrow. I guess we call it Placer County today and tomorrow. So for 21 years, I've been dealing with development issues in this county. And this is one more program that demonstrates the purpose of Placer County is development. It's one program after another, one deal after another. Placer County Conservation Plan, for instance. So this is a pretty cheeky thing for the county to pressure landowners and pressure communities. It really demonstrates a lot of nerve and a lot of disrespect for how to go about dealing with rural areas that do their share already and have been for years, with families running into difficulty and trying to figure out what to do, and neighbors helping neighbors. That's what you should be looking to. How has the county managed to help people in the past? Of course, many people are moving out of this county and have been for 10 years or so. And I've asked those questions a couple of times and given up. I said, how many people moving out? And the last time the county person said to me, it's on my desk. I mean, they don't want to talk about the people that are moving out. So my comment is that what I see here and what I would predict is that this is a program to elect new county supervisors that will do the proper job recommending their community. But it's also a program to elect new state legislators who will stop this kind of action to sort of in a rote way say, you have to do this. But a lot of it is in your technique, how you are identifying landowners and putting pressure on them, making them sound like they may have some profit to make out of this, and that kind of thing. Placer County, its rural values are being run over. Its agriculture is being run over. The minor division by minor division has made this county the highest concentration of wildland interface. All these people living in danger of fire now. And some of these properties look like they've been identified without taking that into account. So here's to hopefully new people will be elected to the state and county government.
Next speaker is Scott Johnson.
Thank you. When I first heard about this rezone, there was something in the press release about, for the first time, the RENA numbers were going to be enforceable by the state, that if the numbers weren't met sufficiently, that the state would take over the permitting of building in Placer County. I don't know if there's a lot of renters here testifying today, but California is short about 3 million units of housing, and that's resulted in the huge numbers of homeless people in California because the rent is too damn high. And financing affordable projects is almost impossible. The RENA standards only require the cities and the counties to designate, as you're doing, property that can have these affordable units built on them. It doesn't require that the units be built. The landowner is not required to build the units. And even if they want to build them, they can't get the financing to do it, usually. So we're in a crisis. That more and more people are going to become homeless as the rent continues to rise. And if we don't build 3 million units in this state, the rent will continue to rise.
Art Click, you're the next speaker.
Hello. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I can only comment on District 5 up at the Bowman, Luther area, those parcels up there that are being considered. That area, I've lived there over 40 years. That area, that Bowman School, is at capacity, beyond capacity. There's no schools there. They've shut down Rock Creek. So there's no schools in the area for these families that will be filling these units. And I think that's probably a major consideration. I don't see that anywhere in here on your considerations. You got down there air quality. Well, that's not going to, that will pass through. Transportation, there's no transportation there. When I first moved here, I commuted 50 miles in one direction to go to work every day. And I did that for years. I think the people who will be moving up for low income, they're not going to be traveling to go to work. They're going to stay right in that area. That Bowman area right there, there's no bike paths, there's no parks. Ashford Park is too far away. There's no parks there. There's nothing there for sustainable living for families. It's freeway, off-ramps. It's for businesses, and it's over the years has declined. My wife and I pick up trash all up and down that road. I don't know, maybe some of you have seen us out there. If it wasn't for us picking up the trash, that area would be filthy, totally. The county doesn't do it. So we got no services in that area for that. I remember once that where that hotel is, I have no idea how that hotel got built. I know that was we know that was a joke because I've lived there long enough to know that land is unstable, and over the years people have tried to build on that, apartment buildings and everything else. They couldn't do it. But all of a sudden now they can build there. And then that one parcel with the canal running through, no one's ever been able to build on that either, because that canal, in order to build there, so all that is going to take a lot of money to build low-income housing. And one final thing, people in my area there, they've gotten their fire insurance canceled. Probably people out in Penryn, Newcastle, everywhere else have got our fire insurance canceled. How are you going to build these big units and not be able to insure them for fire? Well, that's going to add to the cost of the low-income housing, so that's going to be subsidized. I remember when Newsom said this. He was specifically talking about rezoning so that they could put homeless people in places. I got nothing against homeless people or people having homes, but all I can speak for is that Bowman area right there is not the place for it. Thank you.
Next speaker is John Dufour.
Thank you. So I'm John Dufour. I am the president of the Newcastle Community Association. I am no stranger to speaking in public, and we're probably going to get to know each other real well because I'll be at these meetings a lot. I'm curious, there's a lot of open land right across the street from Los Lagos, and it has not been touched. It's very valuable property. I imagine you have not even approached those people. There's a lot of other areas where there are Ferraris and Lamborghinis and so on going in and out through gated properties all the time, and there never seem to be these projects going across the street from them. I think that's interesting. I could easily, and in fact I will, host a meeting at the Newcastle Community Association for this very thing, and I guarantee you there will be 10 times the number of people at that meeting that there are right now. You're talking about Buena Vista. That's literally right across the street from my house. There's a 30-foot cliff on that property leading down to Taylor Road, meaning the only other way without some heavy equipment movement, and I know they can do it, is Buena Vista. Buena Vista is a 30-foot wide road. It has cars all over it. Going up and down it is, putting that kind of traffic on that road is ridiculous. So I'm wondering if the people looking at this have actually visited the sites, or if they just flew over it in a helicopter and said, well, that looks good, or if they even just went there at all and just looked at it on Google Earth and said, well, there's some blank land. As far as the homeless people, what is the cost of a rental in these units? Do we know? Do you have an answer for that? Any idea? Or do you not speak? You don't speak.
What we said earlier, in case you didn't catch that part,
I was 10 minutes late, I apologize.
Was that we were going to hear from everyone. We're listing down the questions that people are answering, and we're going to respond with all of the answers to the questions that are being brought up.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Cost of the rental. Because my point is, I don't see a lot of homeless families in Auburn. I see a lot of homeless, angry, drug-addicted men who are flat out violent and belligerent. I see, if you'll forgive the term, bag women, because I don't wish this on any of them. I see people talking to themselves and imaginary friends on the street. I don't see those people being helped by these units. So who are we helping? You're implying that people are being pushed out of their homes and onto the street, and gosh, if we could just give them a unit that costs $500 a month, they'd be not homeless again. And most of the people that I see that are homeless aren't capable of managing their lives. I don't see the connection. Maybe you can. So much to say I'm fascinated at this whole process and the idea that we did get a mailing says, oh, we're rezoning your project, your home. We're rezoning your home. It was as clear as mud. But basically what I took from it was, we won't stand in your way if you want to add another unit. Okay, well, there isn't space on my house for another unit unless I want to tear it down and build what you want to build. I didn't move there for that. I came from that. I lived in Auburn Greens for 5 years. I saw 3 different gun battles right outside my house with the sheriff there. We got used to ducking bullets. I know what that's like. I've been there. I lived in Auburn Greens. I worked hard. I got myself out of there. I found my wife. We married and bought a home. And now you're bringing it right to my front door again. I worked hard to get out of that. Why aren't you developing near Lincoln where there's 1 million acres of open space and a freeway, and get Amtrak out there? Get mass transportation out there. Why do you want to stuff it? And for crying out loud, yeah, the Valencia Club, let's give them all a place to go. That's a great idea. I just love that. So think these things through. Really think them through. Because you're just creating more of what you're trying to, of what you say you are trying to avoid. You're literally creating more of it. And part of me thinks that is intentional. I don't like Gavin Newsom at all. Gavin, I don't like you. So you go ahead. Thank you.
I'm going to move on to the Zoom callers now. Oh, unless...
One more thing. Bob Grigas, over in Newcastle. One more item. I just looked this up. Last 2 years, California's lost 500,000 people in population. We're adding more high density because we need more population growth in. I think there's a bubble. We need to analyze that. We need to sit back and take a watch. We continue to have a population decrease, and we add real estate units here in California, here in Placer County. What are we going to see? Supply, demand, prices go crashing. Okay? The more I think about this, the less I like the idea of adding your extra 30% buffer. You need to reel that back as far as you possibly can. Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the public who would like to speak who hasn't spoken yet? When you come up to the podium, please state your name.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Carl from Newcastle. My husband is chair of the Newcastle Fire Protection District. And I think that looking at the concerns over fire in our area and our support services, we just do not have the means of dealing with this many more people. I would like to cite a particular instance because we have great fire personnel. They are our 911 call. If you have a little kid who has an emergency, you have granny who can't get up, any of those concerns, it's our fire department that shows up in our rural communities. We've already talked about the narrow roads and the problems responding to 911 calls. When you have a fire department, and I know Newcastle, Penryn, working on a collaborative effort, but to cite one instance, there was a fire in Meadow Vista. Lots of our fire department personnel showed up. Fatality, major fires. There was only one engine left to cover, and all of us who might have a stroke, a heart attack, any other emergency, another fire. How are we going to fund that much more support for these essential services in what we know is fire country? We don't have the mechanism and the funding now to do all the things that we want to do to secure our safety. So if you add this many more people, we don't have the support services for them. And this is a major concern, let alone that adding another, 1,000 people to Penryn, when we have no septic and we have to deal with well water is not a good idea from a health standpoint. So I have, I think, very practical reasons for being concerned about these potential zoning changes. Thank you.
I saw a few hands go up. Did you guys want to stand and speak?
Good evening. I'm Larry Shickluna from North Auburn. And I was just wondering, these low and very low income housing, does that have anything to do with Section 8? And have you done an environmental study on Highway 49? My mother moved up here in '73 when Highway 49 from 80 on through was just 2 lanes and barbed wire fences. And I remember Highway 49 being that, but it's not that way now. I waited 47 years to be able to afford to move up here in 2016 so I could be with my family again. And I asked my wife, I don't remember Highway 49 being this way. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And if you don't have a solution to Highway 49, I don't think it's a good idea you're going to put more properties on Highway 49. Matter of fact, I don't think it's a good idea you put county buildings here. You know how many people come, don't even live in Auburn, and they're driving here, adding to the traffic we have. It's bad enough we have some 40,000 cars coming from Grass Valley and Nevada City coming through here every day. It's just like, where are all these people coming from? Anyway, also this has got to add something to our property taxes. I gave up Prop 13 to be able to move up here. My property taxes almost tripled when I moved up here. In 1970, we had Prop 13 save people who would have lost their houses because they couldn't afford property taxes no more. I can guarantee you our property taxes are going to keep going up. Seniors, there are seniors living here today that are worried about how they're going to pay their property taxes and if they're going to be able to live in their houses any longer because they can't afford the property taxes. But we're just statistics, I guess. So you don't have the infrastructure for what you're proposing, but that's okay because we'll pay for it. And we'll pay for the Section 8 and all that. I worked 47 years to be able to retire in a place where I loved. This Auburn's been my second home until I moved up here. And now I have to worry about how long I'm going to be able to stay here. And I read the Auburn Journal every week, and I hope all of you do too, because there's on the 3rd page there, it shows all the crime in Placer County. And at least half of that, in those 2 sections, are in Auburn. Yeah, on top of everything else, my homeowners just tripled because I'm in a fire zone. I live on Richardson in a neighborhood of over 100 houses, and I lost my property homeowners insurance twice so far in the last 7 years. Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the room who would like to speak who hasn't spoken yet? Okay, I'm going to move on to the Zoom callers. Tiffer S33, you have 3 minutes to speak. We don't hear you.
Hello? Hello?
We hear you. Thank you.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
I didn't recognize what you called me by. Sorry. My name's Brian Myers. I've lived in Penryn for 15 years. I've served on the Penryn Fire Board. I ran our Measure A campaign to support our fire district. This process is really backwards, and it's not your fault. It's not Placer County's fault. It's something the California legislature is mandating that you do. This exercise in futility, really. When a project is proposed, if it needs a rezone, that's usually part of that project's proposal. So then you know what the building's going to be, what the usage are going to be. You can study the specific impacts of that project. Here, you're not able to do that. You're like setting off fireworks in your living room, and that's not going to turn out good. You're rezoning properties without knowing what's going to be built there. So how do you look at the impacts? The impacts you should be looking at are schools. No one's mentioned schools. In Penryn, for example, I think this proposal shows 585 dwelling units. Well, Penryn's entire population, according to the 2020 census, is 830 people. I don't know what your occupancy factor is that you use, but using 1.5 people per dwelling unit, that's going to increase the Penryn population by double. I looked at all the map that you put out, and I didn't see one community like Penryn that's having its population doubled by this proposal. There needs to be a proportionality. I understand everybody's going to have to bear a little bit of this housing, but we're still going to talk about every specific project that comes in. But you should recommend that there be a proportionality within the supervisor's districts so that no one community like Penryn or Auburn bears a huge amount of what this is causing. It's just not fair to double the population of Penryn. I know our local schools are full. There's no water system here, no infrastructure. It's going to be too costly to put this kind of housing in Penryn, and I know it probably will never happen. And you're going through a mathematical process, really, because that's what you have to do for the legislature. But I really would ask you to be careful about this willing property owners. At least one of the properties in Penryn I know is not owned by someone who lives in Penryn. They don't care. All they care about is dollars and cents. And so when you tout that you have willing property owners, you still have a duty to the community to look at what the impact is going to be on a particular community. And there are a lot of issues that aren't going to be covered even in the limited environmental impact reports you're going to be doing. This study, this determination of rezone, should include a full environmental impact report on every single property that's proposed to be part of the rezone, because then you can talk specifics about what the impacts are going to be. When you don't have that specificity, how do you talk about a project in the abstract, saying, oh, we can put 60 units, 30 units, 20 units here, when we don't really even know what that's going to entail or what it's going to cause in that particular community? So I would really recommend that this be a process that goes slow, that looks carefully at each and every project that is being proposed as if it were being built. That's the only way to be fair to all these communities. The problems this rezone is trying to address are much greater than Placer County. The whole state of California is suffering a housing crisis, and we're suffering a homeless crisis and a low-income housing crisis. And the people in charge, the politicians in charge, aren't doing anything except passing the buck down to Placer County and to all the other counties for them to solve the problem. And it's just not going to work. We're going to be at every meeting. We're going to be talking about every single project that's proposed, because the impact on every community is worthwhile and needs to be considered, not just an abstract mathematical process of rezoning. Thank you very much for listening. I see clapping. Thank you.
Yeri, you've got 3 minutes to speak.
Howdy, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
can. Hey, how's it going, guys? As a Placer native, having been born here, raised here, I'm now 34 years old, and I'm just as many other people spoke before me, having worked really hard to be able to move up to a semi-rural area of Placer County, Newcastle, and be able to enjoy it with my wife and the 1.5 acres we have. We are also supportive of people and those that cannot afford housing to be able to have housing somewhere available to them that they can afford. One of my major concerns is, candidly put, how do we prevent this rezoning thing from bringing in any riffraff into the area? How do we vet that? Is there a vetting process? Hello?
Yeri, I think we're going to be answering the questions or addressing the questions after the meeting, when everyone has asked their questions.
Okay, for sure. I appreciate my time.
Did you have any other questions, though, that you would like to share?
That's about it, besides the fact that I absolutely love Placer County. I never want to leave.
Thank you.
Thank you, miss.
Muriel Davis, you're next.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Muriel Davis, and I'm in Penryn, and I have several questions, and so I'll try and get them all through in my 3 minutes. One, I wanted the county to consider the percentage of increase of population of a community. Like the parcels that are being selected in Penryn, I'm sorry to repeat what Brian said, but this is very important. The parcels that are being selected and the units that they would put into would over double the population of Penryn community, which is about 830. And besides the fact the units being selected are violating in the Penryn Parkway, are violating the Penryn Parkway Community Plan. The schools in the Loomis Basin and Penryn areas are already at capacity, and I understand people are not even allowed to put any kids in the school. So I think the schools, like as someone else had said, is very important. There are no services in these areas for affordable housing, and you're supposed to be near transit and jobs and services and stores, but we don't have that. There's in either in any of the places where they're selecting parcels in Penryn. The I-80 intersection cannot handle any more increased traffic. The fire department already had sent out a letter a while back that says it cannot handle buildings that are over 3 stories. I mean, over 2 stories. So, and a lot of these affordable housings are going to be more than 2 or 3 stories. Excuse me. And the fire department is called, like someone else had said, a lot of times for people who fall and or can't get up and or heart attacks and stuff. And these affordable housings could be a lot of elderly people, and there'll be a huge impact on our fire department. And right now, several people I know have lost their homeowners insurance and have to go to this California program to get their homeowners insurance, and are paying like double what their homeowners used to be. And so insurance companies are limiting how many they cover in an area based on the number of units. So if you increase these units here in Penryn, we could have possibly more people losing their homeowners insurance. And I think that's another consideration and that should be in the EIR. I'm very concerned about the SAC hog, and I think I would appreciate if you guys would explain how a non-agency like SAC hog has anything to say what we should be doing. And then I have another concern. Will the cities of Roseville, Rockland, Loomis, and Lincoln also have to do their own selection of products for rezone? If they do, why aren't they going to be included in the Placer County units? I don't think they. So I think I covered everything. But I'm really concerned that. I wanted to thank Hallie for this town hall, and I want to thank everybody who came to and spoke at this meeting. I appreciate your doing this, Callie. But I do not like this project, and I hope the county will do a very good, thorough EIR. And like somebody else said, I'm concerned that our comments are going to be ignored. So I hope that's not true. Thank you. I didn't see a yellow light.
Next is Cuisinart. You need to, okay.
Yep, hello, is that me?
Yes, it's you. Thank you.
Okay, hi. Yeah, I live in Penryn. I have a couple things to say. Number one, I really appreciate all those people that are actually there present. Thanks for coming out and showing up. 3 people behind the desk over there. Stop looking down at your notes. Look up. Have some respect for the people that speak. The third thing that I would like to say is that there's no way we're going to pump thousands of low-income people into Placer County. It's not feasible, okay? I actually do construction for a living. These projects aren't feasible. There's no infrastructure. There's nothing. At least at King Road, we would have to build an off-ramp, which is not going to happen because we'd have to get the DOT and everything involved. There's no way we're going to get that many people on and off Penryn Road. Delaware High School, it's a mess. Okay, this isn't going to happen. This is about flipping the county. It's about getting votes. This is a political issue. I can see you. This is about getting people, low-income voters, into Placer County and flipping the county. That's what this is really all about. Nobody's going to move here. People are going to, what? They're going to move to Sheridan? Why? Why would some poor dude move to Sheridan or Penryn? Why would they do that? Yeah. You see, you 3 people there? That's the question I'm asking you. Why would some poor person move to Sheridan? You don't know, do you?
So as noted, we will be answering questions towards the end, but I do just want to know, I'm taking notes here. I'm not trying to be disrespectful of anybody.
Me neither.
We do value
I'm certainly
and
not being disrespectful to the people that you think are going to move there. Why would they move there? I mean, seriously, is this the monkey in the wrench in your whole theory?
Sir, we hear your comments. We've noted them. Can you move on? We get you have input related to where these properties are going to be, and we're going to respond to the comments.
My question is, who's going to be moving there? See, we've all missed the premise, which is that there are these people that we need to save, right? These low-income, poor people that we all need to save. Well, what are they going to do when you put them in the middle of nowhere? Does anybody have an answer for that question?
So as noted, we will be answering questions towards the end of the comments after we've received everything. Do you have anything else you'd like to comment on?
Other than the fact that I have no idea what these people are going to be doing in the middle of nowhere, and who's going to teach them and who's going to put out the fires, that's beside the point. I mean, all these nice people that are in this room, they were asking the obvious questions. I asked the elephant in the room. Who are these people that we're talking about? You don't even know. Who are these low-income people that we're going to bring into our community?
I believe your 3 minutes are up. We can move on to the next.
Oh, I bet they're up. All right.
The next speaker I have is Marilyn Jasper. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you.
the cause, I'm going to go into the weeds a little bit here. The cause or blame of this lack of affordable housing seems to be in part the result of developers not building their required or fair share of affordable housing, and or the counties apparently not enforcing or dealing with it at that time. Even a little bit of foresight might have meant increasing the required number of units or imposing hefty fines to those who didn't comply, so that there would be a fund to make sure some of it happened. If any part of that is true, or somewhere in the ballpark, then first, it seems unreasonable for innocent homeowners now having to pick up the tab in terms of impacts for problems that non-compliant developers either created or exacerbated and got away with it. Second, it seems the costs to buy land, build affordable housing in appropriate and suitable areas, and be affordable for those different income levels, should be borne by developers or the development industry. We can't go back and find the ones, FINE, find the ones who did not comply, but we can make the industry, meaning all new development, even projects in the hopper, make them pick up greater tabs, put up bonds, etc., to do what should have been done and make certain affordable housing does stay caught up. It's obvious that some of us who have talked about this have not vetted it fully, but some, if not most, of this housing problem belongs to the development industry, and they are the ones who should be paying for it, not homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got next Brady Nations.
Good evening. The first thing I'll ask is that serious attention be paid to the question that's already been asked. Are you telling or are you asking? Where is the voice of the community in this decision? When you come out with your next report, I'd love to see it said that if the community came through with this volume of response, they will be heard. I say that because numerous times I've been to MAC meetings, I've sat in District 4, watched the community have a very strong voice, only to go to the Planning Commission and then the Board of Supervisors, and the community gets overruled. Regarding the willing owners, it's very easy to understand how many of them are willing, because they may have a res ag parcel or something like that that suddenly turns into high density. Low income people don't own, they rent. And suddenly they are able to be landlords of high density units, big economic gain for them, and a terrible impact on the community. I share the history of many other people that said tonight, they came here, they looked, they found a place, they wanted to live. It was a reward for a long career of hard work. I never looked in low income areas. I'll be honest with you, I avoided them. And now to see government say, sorry, Brady, we're going to make your neighborhood available to low income is disappointing. Lastly, it's very disappointing to see one of the parcels identified being right next to a very nice middle school. Even law enforcement spoke at the MAC and expressed concern about the lack of lawlessness that follows these projects. Doesn't make sense to put that next to our schools. Thank you.
Are there any other Zoom callers that would like to speak? Please raise your hand. Okay, I've got... Okay, Ralph Wilson, please speak. You've got 3 minutes.
Am I unmuted now?
You are unmuted. Thank you.
This is Jean Wilson. It's Ralph's laptop. I'm a long-term member of the Loomis Planning Commission, and every jurisdiction has to do the rezoning for the RENA numbers. And so Rockland, Loomis, Roseville, the county has to do for all the county areas not included. So I do understand the difficulty of finding the place for the assigned numbers that we're supposed to meet. But also, as a rural resident and a longtime planning commissioner, I simply think that just because there's land available in some of these rural areas, that doesn't really mean it's a good idea to go ahead and rezone with the kinds of densities that are being proposed. A number of the concerns have been raised. Fire services, if you keep track of what's in the news about our fire departments, it's a hard thing for them to have enough money to function the way it is. And the wildfire edges that we are now increasingly building into means people have talked about lack of their insurance. So fire is a serious concern. The majority of calls, at least in our district, actually are medical calls, not for fires. But when you have a fire, you really want the fire department there instantly too. Education has been mentioned. The schools are impacted just because you pay the $3 and whatever cents it is per square foot, and it may be even less for low income, doesn't mean that we have the means to build more schools to fit all the children that would be coming in. I haven't heard whether sewer is available to all of these parcels. If not, sewer line is expensive to put in, very expensive. And if not, then are we really going to try to put all these high density into septic systems? That's pretty problematic as well. For low income people, it's really important to have access to jobs and to transportation. And to park them out in the middle of nowhere means they don't have easy access to a job. They probably are not going to have access to public transportation. Loomis can hardly get, we got one bus a day each way, and that's about it. What happens to the people who are in actual serious rural areas? And without that, even if they have a car, when you put more people into very rural areas, you are going to increase the number of trips that people have to be driving. And from our own general plan, I know that one of the areas of responsibility is vehicle miles traveled, the VMT, and there are requirements that you're supposed to be reducing your VMT, your vehicle miles traveled, but when you park a whole lot of people out in rural areas that have to drive farther to work, farther to the store, farther to everything, farther to schools, then you really need to look at increasing the VMT that you're supposed to be trying to reduce. So I think it's a serious matter to look at the infrastructure needs and the school needs and the fire department needs. When you put them in a rural area, the infrastructure needs are different than when you have it adjacent to developed areas. And I think those things need to be seriously considered, that it's different to do those things in a rural or semi-rural area. And finally, I'd like to say, as a rural Loomis resident myself, I hope that the county would be a good neighbor to its rural residents in adjoining areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Francis White, you're up next. You've got 3 minutes.
Hi. My question is several questions. One, I echo, everybody before me who spoke. But what I would like And what I want to see is a breakdown of all the impact studies that were conducted and the conclusions of those impact studies as to see how North Auburn can support the low and ultra low income families, individuals, and units that are being proposed. And the timelines as well. I mean, we have one timeline. I joined, I had some login problems, so I joined late. So one timeline was, I guess the planning part of this is due 2024. So what other timelines are there already approved and that will be moving forward? I'd like to see that. And again, the conclusions of all impact studies, not just on water, sewer, fire, schools, roads, all of it. And as to the individual who also stated, who's going to move here? Who's going to move here? I've already seen this happen before. I lived, outside of a rural area where they plan to put low income
Francis, you're breaking up.
Before they did it, they actually dropped the gig, and the governor of Nevada, that impact studies have been conducted. That has to be done before you just drop a unit in and say, let's roll. So when will those be released?
Can you repeat, Francis, can you repeat your last question?
The impact.
We can't hear you.
I think family units and
I think we've captured the
so
gist
forth,
of the
impact studies of the area.
I think we've got the gist of your question about the time frame for the environmental impact report that'll be prepared. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, just that. And like I said, the time frames. I've already heard the one time frame supposed to be released in 2024, and then what comes after.
Got it.
And I'd like to see that as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Samsung SM.
Yeah, my name is Tiffany, and I am a resident of Auburn. And my question, as everybody else, is, of course, the impact that this has on our small towns, the fire, the sewer, all the stuff that's been mentioned. It seems like the majority of Placer County is going to be against this. So what recourse do we have to fight against the state? Why do we have to do this? Do we go to our representatives? How do we proceed from there? That's my question.
Are there any other Zoom callers? Please raise your hand. Miguel, you disappeared off my screen. Patty Knifer, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm a Penryn resident as well, but I took the time to drive along some of the areas that are zoned throughout Placer County, some of the 69 parcels. And I really think that there was a lack of due diligence in choosing those parcels. I mean, someone mentioned did someone just take a drone and mark the parcels that were empty? I'm sure that's not what happened, but I think some of the considerations of which parcels could be rezoned to high density were really overlooked. One of the parcels is in a complete floodplain. I talked to the neighbors there, and it's underwater, a good portion of the year. There are farmlands being rezoned to high density. There are parcels next to the freeway. And I think one of the rulings for the state is you can't build apartments within a few hundred feet of the freeway because of the toxins that the freeway puts off. And it's unfair to put low-income housing next to the freeway. There are a lot of other things that really weren't looked at. Fire was mentioned. Are these really buildable lots? The single lanes going into them, no services being available, no public transportation being available. It's not doing anyone any favors to rezone these properties for low-income, high-density housing. Once you've done that, once you've rezoned them to the 20 to 30 parcels per unit, you can't rezone them back. Those parcels cannot be turned into parks or turned into something productive or turned back into commercial properties, which would be more appropriate for some of them. They are stuck now. And I know that there are a certain number that have to be rezoned to meet the state criteria, but the rezoning was not done appropriately. The other complaint I have is that everything else, when there's a proposed development or it's signed, there's signage there, so the neighbors are aware of it. I think the people who are here, it's just a very, very small portion of the people who are within areas that have the high density rezoning. There were no signs anywhere. Even a restaurant, if it gets a liquor license, there has to be a sign on the door. These kinds of things were not done. I think the neighbors deserve to know these properties are being considered or are being proposed to rezone for high density. And the last thing that I have to bring up, because it came up in Penryn for one of the parcels that is designated for high density, over 200 units. And there is a ruling for low-income apartments and ultra-low-income apartments. If a nonprofit runs that apartment complex or that development, they are entitled to what's called a welfare tax exemption. They can apply for that, which means that those potential 585 units in Penryn will not have to pay any school taxes, not have to pay any fire taxes. They're exempt from public service taxes because a nonprofit owns them. And that is huge. Not just a matter that the schools are already impacted, that there is already no more room in Loomis Unified School Districts. The school superintendent came to several of these meetings and already said we have no more capacity. But also the fact that if it's a low-income housing project that's run by a nonprofit, there will be no money for the schools or for fire. So this is a very dark thing to do, and I believe it's not being done fairly so that the community has the right to know. And otherwise, I mean, it's amazing this many people have appeared at the meetings. It's on the county website, but I think each of the lots should be posted that are planning on being rezoned.
Are there any other callers on Zoom who would like to speak? Miguel, if you can stay online, you've got 3 minutes to speak. Go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. You've got 3 minutes.
Hi. Thank you. My name is Miguel Yukovich. I live in Loomis. I've been a 50-year resident of Placer County. My first question to the group, Loomis had to rezone property for low-income housing. As it turns out, though, it's going to be market rate. So what guarantees are there that if you rezone this property for low income, the units will actually be low-income priced units? So that's my first question. Excuse me. My second question is that it seems that you're putting a great number of these units in the Penryn, Newcastle area. When you consider there's only 800 people that live there, you're going to double or triple the size of the population that's going to be there. There's other areas in Placer County that you can spread out this requirement that would be more suitable than the Penryn, Newcastle area. Thirdly, SACOG came up with these numbers, I believe. And has anybody questioned the numbers that they came up with? Originally, Loomis, they used the whole area of Granite Bay, and we had to do a couple thousand units. They didn't consider the size of the town of Loomis when they made the original calculations. So are these calculations really accurate, or is it just what you received from SACOG? Thank you very much.
Are there any other Zoom callers that would like to speak? Please raise your hand.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, just wanted to say thank you to everyone that showed up this evening and provided their comments and their questions. Also wanted to thank the people that were on the Zoom call as well. There was a question that came up related to are we asking or telling people this evening? And the answer to that is that we are providing information at this point. We do intend to, as Callie mentioned during her presentation, we're going to be going back to the Board of Supervisors with options for them to consider. As she mentioned, we're casting a very wide net at this point, and there are more properties that are currently on the list than are needed in order to meet the requirements that are being provided to us, and that the county, through our housing element in 2021, agreed to do to meet or to have a certified housing element. And so, again, we're going to be going back in September, late September, September 26th, to the board, providing options to them and seeking direction from the board about whether or not sites should be removed from the list and which sites should be kept on the list in order for us to continue on with this rezoning effort. So in terms of where we're going this evening with the remainder of the meeting, Callie's going to be providing some responses to the questions that were asked today. Following that, we'll close the meeting. We'll stick around for folks that are here in attendance if they want to ask additional questions or have some conversation. But I do want to thank everyone for coming this evening, and there will be additional opportunities for public comment as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. No, at this... Yeah, we're going to provide answers to the questions that came up, both the people that were here and asked questions, as well as the folks that provided questions at the Zoom call. And then we're going to close the meeting, but we're happy to stick around and have individual conversations after that. Not additional questions as part of the meeting, but we will stick around and have conversations afterwards. And there will be further opportunities to provide public comment at other community meetings.
Thank you, Chris. So the first thing I want to touch on is the consequences if we don't do this. I had a slide about consequences, and apparently I dropped it inadvertently. But there are some pretty serious consequences, and it's part of it is the county could face lawsuits, but I don't think that that's the important thing to consider, the important thing to consider is that if we're not successful in our rezone program, then we have a very serious consequence of losing our permit authority. And if we lose our permit authority, this means we would lose the ability to issue permits from everything from a window change out to a home to a subdivision. So that has a pretty serious consequence in that it would impact not just, county employees, but that impacts plumbers, roofers, that impacts architects, engineers. If we lose our local permit authority, that is a really big consequence. And what I'm hearing from people is that they don't trust the state. I don't think anyone in this room wants the state to take over our permit authority. And I think that that's a very serious consequence. I think a big benefit of this program is that it will enable property owners to help us solve this crisis at the local level without the state having to come in and issue streamlined ministerial permits. One of the potential consequences of the state coming in and taking over our permit authority is something that's called the builder's remedy. I don't know how often this has been used throughout the state, but it is something that is discussed as a potential consequence. The builder's remedy means that if a project comes in and it has 20% affordable deed restricted, then they do not have to comply with any local development standards whatsoever. So there are some pretty serious consequences, and these aren't smoke and mirror consequences. It's not the state might do this. It's the state has been taking actions. They've been taking legal actions against jurisdictions. State legislators have been very vocal in that they want to hold jurisdictions' feet to the fire with their arenas. So it is a very serious program with serious consequences. We're not doing this to flip the county, as one commenter said. I'm not sure what that meant, but we are doing this to comply with our state mandated requirements, and that is why we are here. The other thing I wanted to touch on is low income versus market rate. And I know that this is a very nuanced program in that we are proposing to rezone to higher densities to meet our very low income. However, through our zoning program, we are not requiring folks to build affordable. We're not requiring folks to build at all. So if someone's property is rezoned, they are not required to build something. Now, the county is required to meet these numbers, and our housing folks in our housing division will be going out and looking for sites to develop. But for those properties that are going to be rezoned, they can build market rate. Another thing I'd like to touch on was Ms. Knifer's comment about the tax exemption. That particular program has only been utilized on 0.04% of all parcels within the county. That's not something that projects typically go for. And the reason for that is when a project has an affordable component, if they're a nonprofit and they are receiving subsidies to construct their development, then they have to do prevailing wages for their construction. For those of you who are in the construction business, you understand that a prevailing wage requirement means that project becomes much more expensive. So those types of projects are, while they may come to these sites, they're likely not the majority of the types of projects we would see. What we are likely to see is market rate of high density development. Some of the other things I wanted to touch on, timelines. So we are required to complete the rezone program by May 2024, and the housing cycle that we are in ends in 2029. So we have annual progress reports that we are required to give to the state, where we report how much residential development has been done. And so we have to report every year where we're at. The other things I wanted to touch on in terms of when the studies from the EIR will be released. We are going through our typical EIR process, and we will be having a kickoff meeting for our notice of preparation next month. I encourage folks to sign up for notifications on our rezone webpage. I am sending people notices of when we will be having meetings, including those meetings for the EIR process. And all of the reports and studies that will be prepared for that will be available publicly. I don't have an exact date of when those studies will be available, but I'm happy to provide those when they are. Just going through my notes here. There was a couple comments about who are the people who would be coming here or living here. I would note that our county actually has a pretty large young population. There was an article in Sacramento Bee last week that noted that Placer County has the highest population and growing of people under 10. So who are we building for? We're building for our children. If our kids are about 10 right now and they want to go out and rent a place after they leave the nest, there's not very many places in Placer County. In addition, there are a lot of people who see what we see in Placer County. I grew up here. I know that it's a beautiful, wonderful place to live, and there are other people who want to enjoy that. In terms of who would move to Sheridan, I would note that compared to other communities within the county, Sheridan is already relatively low income, and a lot of those people actually work in the farming communities in Sutter and Colusa counties. So there are jobs. Are they within the city limit because Sheridan's not a city, but are they within the limits of Sheridan? Perhaps, perhaps not. But what we are looking at and what this program is looking to do is ensure that we are complying with state laws. Now, you may disagree with those laws, and if you are against this program, I encourage what you are all doing here today, which is coming, providing your comments. We are noting these comments. I will be providing the Board of Supervisors with this feedback when we go to them in September. And I just encourage people to continue to pay attention and to please be involved in the process and contact me. Let me just go through my notes again. I want to make sure I've covered everything. Sir, you had some comments about slide 36 and about what we're looking at. I would note that the housing element, which I have here and it's also available online, has a very detailed discussion of the sewer and water and transportation that is available for these communities. It goes into great detail in each and every community plan and discusses capacity. We will also be looking at this information in the programmatic EIR. The other comments about when will things be built. So if if one of these sites is rezoned, which we're shooting for May, what would happen is, someone would submit an application. It would be reviewed. They would be required to comply with the multifamily and mixed-use design guidelines. Additional review may be required depending on what the analysis of the programmatic EIR bears out. If a project needs, for example, a map, then that map would be reviewed and it would also go to hearing. So there are potential opportunities for those projects to have additional input. But it's going to be site-specific. And when those projects come in, there is a process for them to be reviewed, and that's through the design review process. So these projects would be required to adhere to the design guidelines and go through the design review. And the design review process is a public process. I think that's covered just about everything. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add or...
I'll add one additional thing. I think Jennifer may have a couple of things to add as well, and then I'll ask that you respond to the rents as well, the affordable rents. But there was a question related to whether or not the affordable units have to be multifamily units, or are there other options, including accessory dwelling units or ADUs? And in response, I would say that our housing element that Callie just mentioned relies very heavily on production of ADUs to meet the affordable housing requirements for Placer County. The ADUs are able to be counted as low-income units, and so our housing element is projecting that I believe it's about 800 units or so will be built. 800 ADUs will be built within our housing element cycle, and we are intending to count those as low-income units. And so again, heavily reliant on those as a mechanism for providing some level of affordable housing, and we are able to count those. However, if they're not an accessory dwelling unit, in order for the county to count units as affordable that we're providing through those annual reports to the state, they do need to be deed restricted long-term. And long-term is a 55-year deed restriction on the property that it be affordable at either a very low income or low income level. And so that is going to be, I'm sorry, was there a question about who enforces it? It's actually a deed restriction on the property. So the deed restrictions from this that would be on the property would be the county's responsibility to monitor. And we have a housing unit or a housing division within the county executive's office that has a monitoring component to what they do. So they would be responsible for monitoring on that 55-year time period the low-income requirements are being met. And so one additional question that was brought up was, what are we talking about? What are the rent levels at these various ranges that we're talking about, low income, very low income? And so I'll hand it back over to Callie to provide that information.
Thank you. This is from the housing element, tables 19 and 20, which I realize means nothing, but it's from one of the chapters in here. And for a extremely low income household, the annual income range limit would be $26,200, and the affordable mortgage or rent payment monthly would be $655 for extremely low. If that household were to have an affordable home price, that price would be $67,340. I want to note that the average home price in Placer County is $680,000. Just for information, it's quite high. For an extremely low group, that would be an annual income range limit of $43,150. The affordable mortgage or rent payment monthly would be $1,079, and the affordable home price for that low income group is $126,163.
So my name's Jennifer Bias. I just wanted to I was trying to take notes and put your questions back in terms of kind of clarifying information for you. And I think you're coming into this process we're implementing our housing element. And you're probably saying, well, what is your housing element and why do you have to implement it? So again, land use planning in the county starts with the general plan. In the general plan, the county sets policies for where we're going to do what when it comes to land use. So where we're going to build, what type of building can go there, where we're going to conserve, what type of open space are we going to serve, and then how are we going to service all of those areas, as well as, again, identifying our jobs and balancing that out. So countywide, we have a general plan. We have about 15 community plans for each of our unique communities, from Sheraton all the way up to Tahoe. One of the requirements for our general plan is to have a housing element, and that element is required to be updated every 10 years. As part of that update, we just completed, it was adopted in 2020 or 2021, but in that we're required to inventory our land by general plan and zoning and look at where we have available land that's left for all types of housing. That's including things that are above moderate, low, very low, right? So this exercise that we did and that the board adopted the program in 2021 identified that we did have a shortfall. We don't have enough property in Placer County that is appropriately zoned for this these income classes that we were talking about, our affordable classes. So you guys are coming in kind of as part of that exercise. There was a question about how are these sites identified? They were identified when the county had the requirement to look at countywide where is our property that is zoned for multifamily. And as part of our requirement to make sure that we have all different kinds of property zoned appropriately for all different kinds of land uses, this is one of the programs we agreed, and I don't say we agreed, the county adopted a policy that said we would implement this program. And then the state also, again, as a backstop for ensuring that we have zoning appropriately for all incomes, has a number that we have to assign. So that exercise was already done. As part of that exercise, there were sites, as Callie mentioned, the 42 original sites that were identified to participate in a potential rezoning program. We've made some changes based on some additional information. And again, right now we're in the process of starting our public outreach to look at, these are the sites. We had our 42 original sites that we identified. We've added some additional already zoned residential property, and we've started our outreach. So where do we go from here, and how much input and opportunities does the public have to comment? We're very appreciative of everybody that showed up, gave their time, and commented, because we are at the beginning. We do have a time frame of achieving this program and looking at how we can get our housing element in compliance with our numbers that we need. I think Callie mentioned that it's May 2024 that we have to achieve this. We have a complete environmental document that is going to look at a lot of the questions that everyone was asking here. I think I repeatedly heard fire, sheriff, schools, water, roads, transportation. So when we come back and as we move forward, we have a list that is far beyond what we need. So as I think you heard Callie clarify, we are going to be taking, and staff is going to be making a presentation with a recommendation to the board and receiving the Board of Supervisors directions on which properties and how we would move forward. And there will be additional opportunities for the public to participate in that process. So yes, you do have a choice. The county has to achieve our goals. I think Callie clarified, if we don't do this, there are ramifications, but we do have choices about where the housing can go. And again, we're not identifying one community versus another. Some of those sites were selected. There is data that went in behind those selections and information in our housing element. If anybody's interested, we can certainly provide that information of where our resource areas are that we are targeting for adding additional housing opportunities for people. So I just wanted to add that to clarifying. That's how we identified the properties. And we're going to move forward from here. Please get on our notification list. Emails are great to keep engaged of where we go forward with this process, as well as providing written comments. Again, Callie is available. I'm available if you have additional questions and clarifications. So we are going to be looking at the technical studies and moving forward with analyzing the environmental document. I also did want to kind of clarify two things. If you are from Auburn and you're still here, we are currently working on the Auburn-Bowman Community Plan and updating that community plan. We held a meeting of almost about a year ago, and there was literally 6 participants. If you are not engaged in that process, please put your name on that list, because I would love to add you in the process to updating that community plan, because that is, again, your local community plan that's also being updated. Outside of this program, we're looking at updating the community plan. Yeah, I don't want to go too deep here, but we had a news story the night of our first public meeting, and again, we still only had about 6 people participate. So I'm super enthusiastic that there's quite a crowd here today. I think that's great. And then I also, again, kind of wanted to clarify too, for those of you that came, as you drive out of here from the DeWitt Center, and if you exit going out towards Bell Road, please drive past. Right along here, the county, as well as with the affordable housing builder, worked on what's a project called Mercy Housing. It is an affordable project that's actually located right here. So that's just my pitch for, there were slides, I know Callie didn't point it out, but there was pictures of some of the affordable housing projects that are actually exist and are functioning today in the county. And that is one, if you just drive right out, there's a nice little feather statue there. And that is actually providing, I think it's 100% affordable housing. So those are kind of my clarifications. Hopefully that's adding more information.
Okay, and with that, we're gonna wrap up, but we will stick around to answer some questions for you. What was that? Yeah, so with this response, then we're going to wrap up, and then we'll stick around. But so a couple of things to point out. One is that each city has their own requirements to provide for affordable housing. So the incorporated cities are going through their own exercises to come up with units as well. In addition to that, as I think Callie presented as part of her presentation, there are a number of specific plans that are adjacent to the cities of Roseville, Rockland, and Lincoln. And those specific plans do have requirements for building out affordable housing, and there are sites in those areas. What we're looking at here is that there's a shortfall of units, even with taking those into consideration. So all we're looking at is addressing that shortfall, but the housing element has thousands of units identified that are not part of a rezone effort because they're already identified as sites for lower income housing. So with that, we'll wrap up, and we'll stick around. And again, there'll be additional opportunities for comment. Thank you for attending tonight.